Have you heard the term emotional labor? I've been hearing these words a lot lately, and I find the term and its definition really intriguing. Welcome to the Cycle of Care podcast. I'm your host, Mona Zignego. Today, we are going to talk about emotional labor and the cycle of care. We will also participate in an emotional labor activity to reflect on emotional labor so that we can become more aware of it when we are engaging in emotional labor in ways that are not helpful. And, of course, we will end our time together with the Cycle of Care superhero. When I was in high school, I worked for a while at a movie theater in the concessions area. It was a really fun job. I got to see movies for free, and I could eat popcorn whenever I wanted. Even better, I could control how much butter went on the popcorn. One beautiful Sunday afternoon, the ribbon on a film reel snapped right in the middle of a showing. Yeah, this was back before digital movies. The manager, I'm just going to call her Mary, tried to call the owners, but they were out for the afternoon and did not answer her phone call. So Mary had to quickly decide whether to fix the reel on the spot or cancel the movie for the afternoon and send everyone home. Mary conferred with me about this, because if she decided to fix the reel, I would have to stay later than I was scheduled. I was open to staying. I wanted to help, so Mary made the decision. She decided to offer the patrons free popcorn and soda if they were willing to stay while she spliced the reel back together. Those that decided to leave would receive a coupon for a free movie as compensation. I quickly whipped up another batch of popcorn and began the task of serving everyone who decided to stay. The line stretched far back, and it took a long time to fill all the orders. Some customers were patient and kind, but others were irritated and short-tempered. As the afternoon wore on, I did my best to keep a smile on my face and stay friendly. Despite feeling exhausted, I also felt proud. I knew I was helping out, and I felt like I was doing a good job. I'm telling you this story because it exemplifies emotional labor in action. I engaged in a lot of emotional labor that day. More about that in a minute. Emotional labor happens when what we are showing people on the outside does not match the emotional turmoil of what we are feeling on the inside. For example, if a fast food worker is being yelled at and berated by customers and looks calm and cool on the outside while experiencing emotional turmoil on the inside, the fast food employee is experiencing emotional labor. Emotional labor is the work we do to manage our emotions, to fulfill our job or societal expectations. Emotional labor can be helpful at times for facilitating care. However, it can also be disruptive to care. Let's go deeper. Emotional labor is the effort involved in managing and regulating one's own emotions to do what we think needs to be done to fulfill the emotional demands of a job or our interactions with people, like family and friends. The sociologist Arlie Hochschild has described emotional labor as deliberately suppressing certain feelings to meet organizational rules or societal expectations, even when those feelings differ from the emotions someone is actually feeling. In other words, when we care about our work or how we show up for others, we will do the emotional labor needed to facilitate care to fulfill the emotional labor expectations of the job or our role in our family or society. I stayed at the movie theater that day to try to help out and fulfill what I thought were my expectations for this job. I thought that it was something that was helpful and needed. Was it tiring? Yes. Was I exhausted? Also yes. Did I stay far past my scheduled departure time that day? Yep. But I did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. And I thought it was what my bosses would have wanted me to do. And even though I was tired and stressed, I tried to do my job that day with a smile on my face. Researcher Alicia Granzi expanded on this concept of emotional labor by describing two main ways people perform emotional labor. The first is surface acting. When we display surface acting, we are displaying emotions that are not genuinely felt, such as a fast food worker continuing to calmly serve a difficult customer. When we engage in deep acting, we are trying to genuinely experience the emotions one is expected to show, such as actively working to feel empathy or enthusiasm, like trying to feel genuinely happy when serving a difficult customer. Maybe we drum up compassion and empathy for the customer so that we can authentically live on the outside what we are feeling on the inside. This can be a lot of work, thus emotional labor. Emotional labor is common in fields like education, healthcare, customer service, and caregiving roles. While essential and valuable, it can also be disruptive to care by contributing to stress, burnout, and decreased emotional well-being. If boundaries are not maintained, and if care is not provided to ourselves at key times, such as relaxing on weekends or after work. Interestingly enough, as I researched content for this podcast, I found that emotional labor has moments where it has value because it forms the foundation for meaningful human connections, particularly in professions centered around care and support. In fields like education, healthcare, customer service, and caregiving, emotional labor directly impacts the quality of interactions, trust, and effectiveness of care provided. For example, a teacher's ability to remain empathetic and patient significantly influences a student's academic and emotional growth. A healthcare worker's capacity to show compassion can profoundly affect patient recovery and comfort. Similarly, customer service representatives' emotional labor tries to ensure positive experiences for customers that build loyalty and trust, like I tried to do on that Sunday afternoon at the movie theater. When individuals engage thoughtfully in emotional labor, it enhances relationships, strengthens communities, and fosters environments of genuine care and empathy. It helps people feel seen, understood, and valued, with the potential for making it a powerful force for personal growth and collective well-being. Recognizing and valuing emotional labor can facilitate care through the creation of supportive, nurturing spaces despite the challenges it may bring. Emotional labor deals with sometimes invisible, hidden, psychological effort that is required to manage emotions and emotional expressions in our jobs and personal lives. Initially discussed by sociologist Arlie Russell Hochschild in her book, The Managed Heart, the term originally referred to the ways workers, like flight attendants or customer service representatives, had to deliberately manage their emotions to fulfill organizational expectations or guidelines. Emotional labor shows up in various ways in our lives. At work, for example, it can show up as teachers managing frustration while remaining patient with students, nurses maintaining compassion while dealing with difficult patients, or customer service workers maintaining politeness in the face of hostility. At home and in relationships, emotional labor can show up, for example, as comforting a loved one, even when you're emotionally drained, or when you find yourself diffusing conflicts within your family. So again, the key concepts of emotional labor are surface acting versus deep acting. Surface acting is putting on a mask to show emotions that are not genuinely felt, such as faking enthusiasm or friendliness. For example, smiling through a stressful customer interaction while feeling frustrated. The impact of this is that it can lead to emotional exhaustion, stress, and burnout over time. And then there's deep acting, actively working to feel or cultivate an expected emotion authentically. For example, intentionally empathizing with a difficult person to genuinely feel compassion. The impact of this is that deep acting can be more sustainable and beneficial, though still demanding emotionally and psychologically. Unfortunately, emotional labor often goes unrecognized and unappreciated, especially in jobs traditionally seen as care-based. This invisibility can lead to burnout. So, although there are some benefits to emotional labor, the costs of an imbalance in emotional labor are burnout and exhaustion. This continuous management of our emotions can lead to fatigue, burnout, and in the context of our employment, reduced job satisfaction. Emotional labor can also have mental health implications. Higher levels of stress, anxiety, depression, or emotional exhaustion can result from ongoing unmanaged emotional labor. The constant effort to manage emotions can lead to physical and emotional exhaustion. Additionally, prolonged emotional labor can lead to burnout, especially if it's not balanced with time for rest and personal needs. This constant suppressing or managing of emotions can lead to feelings of frustration, resentment, or depression, and the disproportionate emotional labor can strain relationships if one person is consistently expected to handle the emotional needs of others. This last one is really interesting to me. If we are constantly expected to handle the emotional needs of others, it can strain relationships. We could probably do a whole podcast about that. It's one thing to vent or to go to a family member, coworker, or friend for support, but it is entirely different to expect people to carry the emotional burdens of another and handle their problems in a continuous and never-ending fashion. This is a huge emotional cognitive load. Many of us are like little sponges, soaking up all the emotional burdens placed upon us by others in our efforts to be kind and provide care. Therefore, boundaries are incredibly important for us to have when it comes to emotional labor. Recognizing and setting emotional boundaries is essential to prevent the negative effects of emotional labor. Boundaries help bring some balance so that we can have some breaks from emotional labor and restore ourselves. Practical boundaries might include clearly communicating your emotional limits. I'm imagining myself actually saying the words, "I have reached my emotional limit here as to what I can handle. It is simply too great a cognitive emotional load to expect me to continue in this manner." As I say this, I'm thinking of a new word to express this. How does this sound? Cogniemotional overload. I am going to care for myself by not allowing myself to go into cogniemotional overload when I have reached my cogniemotional limits. Okay, next idea for setting practical boundaries. Another way to set boundaries is to allocate dedicated time for rest and self-care, and delegating emotional tasks and responsibilities within work or home environments. This is a hard one for me, but I'm trying. And recognizing signs of emotional overload so that we can intentionally step back. Understanding emotional labor matters. When emotional labor is recognized, valued, and managed intentionally, individuals and organizations experience improved mental health and reduced burnout, stronger, healthier relationships both personally and professionally, and increased empathy and authentic connections within communities. For me, learning more about emotional labor for this podcast has allowed me to deepen my self-awareness of when I'm overextended in the emotional labor department. So, learning about emotional awareness can help us to have more metacognition about when and how emotional labor is showing up in our lives. It can help us to improve our capacity to care genuinely for others without becoming depleted. And understanding more about emotional labor can help us to care for ourselves and to stave off burnout. Let's go back to my movie theater story. As a high school student, working at my movie theater job, I thought that my actions that day were what the owners would have wanted. I was willing to put in the extra physical and emotional work that afternoon to be helpful. Even though I had homework and other things to do that day after work, I had I had actually assumed that Mary and my efforts would be recognized and valued. So it mitigated the negative effects of the emotional labor I engaged in the moment as I worked to calm customers down and support in the ways that I could that day. But our efforts were not appreciated. And this happens sometimes. Sometimes we show care for others and it's just not reciprocated. The cycle of care is broken and emotional labor is high in a way that's not positive. As an important note, though, situations such as this can become a way for us to learn and grow if we are open to allowing for growth and possibilities. How can I learn from this is a question we can ask to mitigate the negative effects of emotional labor. But back to my story. The owners were a husband and wife, and eventually the husband got the messages on his answering machine. Yeah, this was before cell phones. And he stormed into the movie theater in a drunken rage, shouting angrily at Mary and I. He did not like the way Mary handled things, and he let her know it. Looking back, I'm sure there was a reason for his anger. He was likely mad at the machinery and the situation. He probably felt out of control and at a loss. But unfortunately for us, all of whatever feelings he had were taken out on us. Mostly on Mary, though, as the manager in charge that afternoon. Suddenly, all the adrenaline that had fueled me that day was gone. I was exhausted. Everything we had done to try to handle the situation was for naught. I was crippled by the weight of this emotional labor, and I was actually torn between crying or raging myself as the events of the day played out in front of me. This can happen. We can try to provide care and, do what we think is right, put up boundaries, or otherwise try to facilitate good in the world. And then it might feel sometimes like someone or something tears down what we have built. Again, the most important thing can be, what did I learn? How can I move forward from this? How can I build understanding and wisdom? How can the world become a better place from here? When I got home that night, my dad was sitting on the front porch enjoying the Sunday evening. He and I talked through what had happened, and He was there for me and mitigated the toll the day had taken on me. And this is another important thing about dealing with the negative effects of emotional labor. We need strategies to diffuse the toll emotional labor can take on us. And one of those strategies can be to have a person, someone who can be there for us to talk to debrief, to connect with, to make sense of things. And eventually that person can support us in our efforts to help us move on, which I did from this movie theater job after I was told the next day that I would not be paid for the extra time I stayed at the theater to help. This experience at the movie theater taught me something crucial about emotional labor. While emotional labor can build connections and foster care, it can also leave us depleted if it goes unnoticed or unappreciated. My willingness to put in extra effort was based on my sense of responsibility and care, yet in the end, it wasn't valued or respected. It was a difficult lesson in emotional boundaries for me, and as I look back on that day, I see that it showed me the necessity of recognizing when emotional labor has become unhealthy or unsustainable. I invite you to join me in becoming more cognizant or metacognitive about where emotional labor is showing up in your life in good and not so good ways. We are always a work in progress. We don't always have all the answers or do all the right things in the moment, but we can grow from them, learn from those experiences, and move forward, bringing care into the world in meaningful and sustainable ways. As we continue with today's episode, I'd like you to think about your own life. When are you engaging in emotional labor that's helpful, meaningful, and manageable? And when might it be crossing into unhealthy territory? Let's explore this together through today's reflective activity that is designed to help you not only be aware of when you need to create boundaries, but also to build greater emotional awareness. The activity for today is called Emotional Labor, Facilitating or Disrupting Care. Today's activity about emotional labor really tunes into emotions. So, if you haven't already listened to episode 1, please listen to it to learn more about emotions. You can also find more information about emotions in chapter 1 of my book, Transforming Teaching Through the Cycle of Care. Grab a notebook or take a few quiet moments to reflect on these prompts. The goal of this activity is to help you recognize emotional labor in your life, determine if it is serving you and others, and to support you in exploring strategies for protecting your emotional well-being. Step 1, notice and reflect. Think about a recent situation that involved emotional labor. Describe the situation. For example, helping a friend through a crisis, managing stress at work, mediating a family conflict. How did you feel on the inside during this situation? Were you calm, anxious, frustrated, exhausted, satisfied? How did you express yourself outwardly? Were your outward expressions different from your inner feelings? Next step, was care facilitated or disrupted? Did your emotional labor in this situation facilitate care? Did it help build trust, strengthen connections, and positively impact others? Did it feel sustainable and aligned with your values? Or did your emotional labor disrupt care? Did it lead to feelings of resentment, exhaustion, burnout, or being unappreciated? Next step, identify your boundaries. If your emotional labor disrupted care, consider what boundary was missing or compromised. Did you say yes when you wanted to say no? Did you neglect self-care or rest? What boundary could you establish next time to protect your emotional well-being? For example, saying no more often, setting time limits, or clarifying expectations. Next step, who is your person? Reflect on who you can turn to when emotional labor feels heavy or exhausting. Who in your life provides emotional support without judgment? A family member, a friend, colleague, mentor, counselor? When and how can you reach out to this person when emotional labor becomes overwhelming? And then last of all, let's talk about some strategies for detachment. We want to, finally, consider practical ways to detach from negative emotional labor. What activities help you reset and recharge emotionally? Walking, journaling, meditation, creative hobbies, physical exercise, listening to music, taking quiet time? What intentional step can you take today to release yourself from negative emotional energy? Remember, identifying when emotional labor is helpful or harmful, setting clear boundaries, having supportive people in your life, and intentionally engaging in activities that direct care toward yourself can help you manage emotional labor more effectively. This reflection will support you in your cycle of care journey, supporting the ability to continue caring for others without depleting yourself. Now it's time for our cycle of care superhero. Today's cycle of care superhero is my manager, Mary, from the movie theater story I told earlier. I feel like Mary exemplified care along with emotional labor in action, and her story is one of professionalism, empathy, and integrity in the face of a challenging situation initially on that Sunday afternoon and as the day wore on. On that Sunday afternoon, when the film reel broke unexpectedly and she could not get a hold of the owners, Mary quickly assessed her options and made a decision grounded in professionalism, empathy, and customer care. Instead of abruptly sending everyone home, she offered free popcorn and soda, carefully working to maintain goodwill and positive relationships with customers. Throughout the stressful process of repairing the reel and calming frustrated patrons, Mary kept her composure, actively managed her emotions, and communicated with calmness and clarity. Mary demonstrated true emotional labor, not just surface-level acting, but genuine empathy and a deep concern for others, including me. She recognized my willingness to stay late and made sure to involve me respectfully in the decision-making process. Despite the intense pressure, she never lost sight of the human element, striving to handle the situation with patience, dignity, and kindness. Even though our efforts ultimately went unappreciated by the theater owners, Mary's thoughtful handling of the situation left a lasting impact on me. Her approach modeled how emotional labor, when performed with clear boundaries and genuine care, can strengthen relationships and foster a nurturing environment, even in stressful moments. Even though I have lost touch with Mary, her example reminds us that emotional labor, when acknowledged and valued, has the power to transform challenges into opportunities for deeper connection and personal growth. Mary's thoughtful, caring leadership inspires me still and makes her today's cycle of care superhero. As we wrap up today's episode, let's revisit what we've explored about emotional labor. We've learned that emotional labor involves managing our emotions to fulfill expectations at work, at home, and in our communities. It's powerful because it can foster deep connections, trust, and genuine care, but it can also lead to stress, burnout, and exhaustion if we don't maintain healthy emotional boundaries. I created the word cognomotion from blending the words cognitive and emotion to describe the situation that occurs when we are expending a lot of cognitive energy on emotional labor. Through today's reflective activity, we took time to recognize when emotional labor is helping us care authentically and when it might be pushing us beyond healthy limits. We also highlighted the importance of having someone we trust to help us process heavy emotional labor, and we discussed practical strategies to detach and recharge. As you go forward, notice and reflect on situations in your life that embody emotional labor. Think about if care is facilitated or disrupted. Identify your boundaries going forward. Consider who your person is to help you mitigate the negative effects of emotional labor, and reflect on how you can healthfully detach from situations fraught with negative emotional labor. By doing this, we can all identify when emotional labor is harming us or others and allow us to care for the folks around us more effectively without depleting ourselves or others in the process. Finally, our cycle of care superhero Mary showed us how thoughtful emotional labor can make a significant difference, even when our efforts might not be fully appreciated. Her story is a reminder to recognize, value, and respect emotional labor in ourselves and in others. If today's episode resonated with you, rate, review, and share it with someone who needs this message. You can connect with me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, or at my website, monazignego.com. You can also find more information about care in my book, Transforming Teaching Through the Cycle of Care. Let's keep this conversation about emotional labor going. Connect with me on social media or send me a message. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm I'm Mona Zignago, and this is the Cycle of Care podcast. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Take care.